You know how we often look at nature in terms of who eats whom? That classic food web idea, right?
Yeah, the predator-prey thing. Lions, zebras, grass.
Exactly. It seems pretty straightforward. But, well, have you ever stopped to think if there's maybe more going on than just that physical transfer of energy?
Absolutely. That traditional view, while it's fundamental, sure, it might be overlooking a whole other layer of complexity. A fascinating new study suggests we need to consider ecosystems differently,
How so?
as intricate networks of communication, actually, where the flow of information is just as crucial as, say, the movement of matter or energy. We're about to dive into some really surprising aspects of how nature connects.
So it's not just about the survival of the fittest in a purely physical fight. There's more to that fitness equation.
Precisely. This research, it was led by Dr. Ulrich Bros from IDIV and Friedrich Schiller University Jena. It proposes a real shift in how we understand ecological dynamics.
A shift.
Okay. Yeah, they're suggesting that ecosystems function through something like an internet of nature, where exchanging information is as vital as exchanging nutrients or sunlight.
An internet of nature. Okay, that's a hook. Let's unpack this. What's the core idea here? What are we really trying to get at in this deep dive?
Well, the core idea is that by understanding these information pathways, how different organisms communicate and respond to signals, we can get a much deeper insight
Into what
into
exactly?
how ecosystems function, how they adapt, how they respond to change. So our mission today is to explore these different forms of communication and what they tell us about the natural world. We'll be drawing heavily on this new study. It offers a pretty compelling new perspective.
Okay. So for a long time, we've mapped out those tangible connections. Who eats what, pollination, seed dispersal. What's the usual picture?
The traditional ecological view, it's given us a vital framework, no doubt. It lets us categorize species, producers, consumers, decomposers,
Mhm.
and understand how energy moves through those trophic levels. We've detailed, pollination syndromes, how flower shapes attract specific pollinators,
Right.
mapped seed dispersal routes. That gave us a foundational understanding of niches, balance, that sort of thing.
But if we only look at those physical links, what are we missing? What's the gap?
The key limitation is that it often treats organisms as relatively passive, just sort of receiving or transmitting energy and matter.
Ah, okay.
This new perspective emphasizes that organisms are constantly sensing, interpreting, and responding to a wealth of information. This exchange shapes their behavior, their interactions, and ultimately the dynamics of the whole ecosystem. It's a much more active picture, more responsive.
That makes sense. It's like looking at a busy marketplace just by tracking the goods being swapped
Right.
without paying attention to the conversations, the negotiations, the actual flow of information that drives those exchanges.
Exactly. The study itself uses a really powerful analogy for this. Imagine trying to understand global trade without knowing the internet exists.
You'd have a very skewed view.
Totally. A very limited, incomplete grasp of what's driving it, the speed, the complexity of the system.
Okay, so if we're looking beyond the dinner plate, what kinds of information signals are we talking about in this Internet of Nature? The study breaks it down, right, into three types.
Yes, they've identified three main types of information signals operating alongside those physical interactions we usually focus on. The first one is trophic information links.
Trophic. Okay, that refers to feeding relationships, yeah. So how does information play into that?
Precisely. These are the indirect communications within predator-prey dynamics. Think about wolves hunting elk, a classic example.
Okay.
The wolves might detect the elk through tracks in the snow, maybe scent markings, or even just seeing them from a distance. That's information the predator's actively seeking out and using.
And the elk, I suppose, even if they don't directly see a wolf, they're also picking up on subtle signs, hints of danger.
Absolutely. The smell of a predator hanging in the air, maybe the sudden silence of birds nearby, even just the nervous behavior of other elk. Those are all information cues. They signal a potential threat.
And how do they react?
Well, the elk might respond by bunching up, forming tighter groups for defense, or maybe fleeing to safer ground. There's no direct physical contact at this point, but a critical information exchange is happening. It dictates whether an interaction might happen or prevents it entirely.
So the key insight is that communication about feeding isn't just the act of eating, it's this constant flow of cues and responses.
Exactly. It's an ongoing dialogue of risk assessment.
Fascinating, like an early warning system woven into the food web. Okay, what's the second type of information link they found?
The second type is what they call pure information links. These are interactions where species get valuable information from each other, even though they don't directly interact physically. Like, They don't eat each other or compete directly in that moment.
Pure information. How does
Yep.
that work?
This is where you start to see just how interconnected things can be, sometimes in really surprising ways.
Hmm.
Picture a hyena spotting vultures circling way up high.
Okay.
Now, the hyena isn't going to attack the vultures, and the vultures aren't a threat to the hyena, but the hyena can interpret the vulture's behavior, that concentrated circling. It often means there's carrion nearby, a potential meal.
So the hyena is basically using the vultures as like a remote sensing system for finding food, a beacon.
Exactly. The hyena is reading that silent clue from the vultures.
Yeah.
It guides its own foraging, leads it toward a resource it might have missed otherwise. These seemingly indirect connections, they create a much more complex web.
It really shows how information can flow even between species that seem disconnected on the surface.
That's the point. It highlights this wider interdependence.
Incredible. It really does paint a picture of the ecosystem as this, I don't know, distributed intelligence network. So what's the third category?
The third category is environmental information links. This focuses on how organisms respond to the non-living parts of their environment.
Non-living? Like what?
Think about cues like changes in temperature, light levels, wind direction, maybe even the chemical makeup of the soil or water.
So this isn't organism-to-organism communication, but organism reacting to the environment itself.
Precisely. A classic, maybe unfortunate example is moths being drawn to artificial lights at night.
Right, you see that all the time.
The light isn't another creature, but it triggers a powerful and often harmful behavioral response. Or similarly, spiders might deliberately build their webs near porch lamps because the light attracts more insects.
Using the environment strategically.
Exactly. Or consider a chameleon changing its skin color. It's responding to visual information from its surroundings to camouflage itself. Better survival. So the key takeaway here is that organisms are constantly monitoring and reacting to a whole range of environmental signals.
These examples really drive home how much organisms rely on interpreting signals, not just from each other, but from the world around them. Okay, how does understanding this whole Internet of Nature help us understand something like ecosystem resilience? You know, the ability to bounce back after disturbances.
This is a critical point. This new perspective offers really significant insights here. The study suggests that a robust flow of reliable information is a key factor in how well ecosystems can handle and recover from big events.
Like wildfires or floods.
Exactly. Or even the introduction of invasive species. If species can effectively communicate about threats, find refuge areas, or just adjust their behavior based on reliable info about changing conditions, the whole system is likely to be more resilient.
So if the communication channels are clear, working well, the ecosystem has a better shot at bouncing back when things go wrong.
Precisely. Take a wildfire. Animals that can quickly detect the smoke, maybe hear the crackling, and effectively communicate that danger to others nearby are more likely to get to safety.
Makes sense.
Or, say a new invasive predator arrives. Prey species that can learn to recognize it, maybe by observing the alarm calls or behavior of others, and avoid it, they have a higher chance of survival. They can adapt. So resilience isn't just about the physical bits, it's also about how effective the communication network is.
Okay. So on the flip side then, what happens when this Internet of Nature gets disrupted? When there are failures in communication?
Well, when these crucial pathways get impaired, it can lead to confusion, instability, even in food webs that look okay on the surface.
How so?
Imagine if those elk, because of some kind of interference, couldn't pick up the signs of approaching wolves. Or if the hyena couldn't accurately read what the vultures were doing, their responses would become maladaptive, right? Leading to maybe more predation or missed chances for food.
So the structure might look intact, but the function is breaking down.
Exactly. The ecosystem might still appear structurally sound, who eats whom hasn't changed, but that breakdown in information flow can seriously undermine its function and its long-term health.
So to really get a handle on how an ecosystem might change or respond to future challenges, we need to map not just the traditional food webs.
And the physical interactions.
Right, but also these more subtle information-based connections.
Absolutely. The study strongly argues for understanding both the material flows and the informational flows. This more holistic view will let scientists build better models, make more accurate predictions about how ecosystems will respond to different pressures. It gives us a much more nuanced understanding.
This all has pretty profound implications, especially when you think about the massive impact human activities are having everywhere. How are we messing with these natural communication systems, often without even realizing it?
Yeah, this is a major concern highlighted by the research. Our impact goes way beyond just, chopping down forests or direct pollution.
Mm.
We are essentially generating a lot of noise in this internet of nature.
Noise.
Yeah, effectively scrambling or blocking the signals that all sorts of species rely on for survival for their ecological roles.
Can you give some specific examples? How are our activities creating this static?
Well, artificial light pollution at night is a big one,
Mm.
especially for nocturnal animals. Moths, for instance, use natural light cues like the moon for navigation and finding mates.
Mm.
Artificial lights can totally disorient them.
Wasting energy, messing up breeding.
Exactly. And then there's industrial and urban noise pollution. It can mask important sounds. Birdsong, for example, used for communication, defending territory, attracting mates.
Mm-hmm.
Or frog calls,
So they can't shear each other.
where the signals get degraded. Chemical pollution, too. It can interfere with pheromones in insects. That's vital for finding mates, for foraging, coordinating social behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Miriam Hurt's work on ants highlighted this.
Ants use chemicals, right. So even things like road traffic, things we barely notice, could have ripple effects.
Precisely. Dr. Hurt specifically mentioned how subtle vibrations from road traffic from industrial structures can interfere with the vibrational signals ants use for complex coordination in their colonies. It's amazing. And it's not just ants. So many different organisms, from microbes up to birds and frogs, rely on these often very subtle signals, chemical, acoustic, visual, vibrational, for really essential things: reproduction, finding food, avoiding predators.
And when these signals get masked or distorted or blocked, the consequences can be pretty serious for them and for the whole ecosystem.
Yes, we're increasingly seeing evidence of it. Reproduction failures, changes in feeding patterns, shifts in ecological roles, all directly resulting from this sensory destruction. It's like trying to have a really important conversation in a room full of loud static.
The message just doesn't get through.
Right. The crucial information can't get through effectively. It really underscores the often hidden ways our activities can degrade how ecosystems actually work.
This paints a rather, well, sobering picture for traditional conservation. If we're mostly focused on preserving physical habitats and maybe regulating hunting, are we potentially missing a huge piece of the puzzle?
The study strongly suggests we are.
Yeah. Traditional conservation strategies often don't really factor in the critical role these information pathways play. We need to broaden our focus. We need to explicitly include what's known as sensory ecology.
Sensory ecology.
Okay, which means understanding how organisms perceive and interact with their environment through all their senses, and importantly, how human-caused disturbances impact those sensory interactions.
So what does this shift in perspective mean practically for how we might approach conservation? What actions might we need to think about?
It means we need to start identifying the key signal senders and receivers in different ecosystems. We need to understand the characteristics of their signals, how far do they travel, how long do they last, what interferes with them.
That sounds complicated.
It is, but researchers are exploring new tools. Things like creating detailed audioscapes, basically, comprehensive sound recordings of entire environments, or developing vibration maps to help us document and analyze these complex communication patterns.
So mapping the sound and vibrations, not just the species locations. Exactly. This kind of detailed mapping can then inform conservation. It can highlight areas where these information pathways are most critical and maybe most vulnerable to disruption.
That sounds like a whole new and really exciting frontier in ecological research and conservation planning.
It really is.
Yeah.
As Dr. Brose put it quite eloquently, this perspective is a fundamental shift, moving away from seeing nature as just passive particle movement
Right.
to recognizing living beings as active producers and essential users of information. The implications for how we protect nature are profound. We need to safeguard not just the physical spaces, the habitats.
But also the communication lines.
Exactly. These vital information pathways through the medium, whether that medium is air, water, or even the soil itself.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up the main part of our discussion, this Internet of Nature idea gives us a powerful new lens. Ecosystems aren't just collections of species bumping into each other physically.
Not at all.
They're also intricate, dynamic networks of communication.
Precisely. They're complex networks. Organisms are constantly exchanging not just resources, but crucial strategies, warnings, other vital information through this huge variety of signals. Protecting nature, really protecting it, means we have to recognize and actively protect these essential signals by making conscious efforts to reduce the different kinds of noise we introduce. Dimming artificial lights, mitigating industrial sounds, trying to restore more natural environmental rhythms.
This has been a genuinely enlightening deep dive into these often invisible connections that really underpin the natural world. So for you, the listener, I think the key takeaway here is that ecosystems are far more than just the sum of their physical parts.
Hmm.
They are intricate, vital communication networks, and understanding these invisible threads is absolutely crucial if we're going to truly understand and effectively protect the biodiversity around us.
And considering this internet of nature, it really does raise some big questions, doesn't it? About our own relationship with the environment. How might we need to rethink our modern lifestyles, our technologies, to minimize how much we disrupt these essential natural communication pathways?
Definitely.
And, for those of you preparing for your UPSC examinations, this interconnected perspective is highly relevant. This idea of ecosystem functioning, the impact of human activities through this sensory lens. It's really central to environmental science and conservation today. It offers a much more nuanced, comprehensive understanding of these critical topics.
Absolutely. Some crucial food for thought there as we navigate our impact on the natural world. If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity or maybe left you with more questions about this fascinating Internet of Nature,
We hope it has.
we strongly encourage you to like this, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives like this one, and definitely leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, any further queries you might have. We genuinely love to hear what resonated with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, a big thank you to Earth.com. Their reporting on the research was the foundation for our discussion today.